I am sitting in seat 14A, staring out the window at the clouds beneath me as we cruise at 30,000 feet, and my phone hasn't stopped buzzing for the last 2 hours. It's my mother. 34 text messages in less than 90 minutes, and they all say the exact same thing in escalating levels of hysteria. Cancel the trip and come home right now. She wasn't asking, she was demanding, using every ounce of emotional manipulation she has perfected over my 28 years of life, claiming that if I didn't turn this plane around, I was essentially killing her and destroying our entire family legacy. I looked at the screen, saw the 34th notification, and instead of feeling the usual wave of guilt that she has conditioned me to feel since childhood, I felt a cold, sharp sense of clarity that I hadn't experienced before. I turned my phone on airplane mode, leaned back and finally took a breath, but it left me wondering, was I the villain for finally prioritizing my own life over her suffocating control? Tell me if you would have done the same thing, or if I'm just a heartless daughter who abandoned her mother in her hour of need. To understand why I am currently 35,000 feet in the air, and why I decided to cut off my mother on the most important day of my life, we have to go back to the beginning, back to when I was a child growing up in a house where my existence was basically treated as an extension of my mother's ego. My mom was always obsessed with appearances, the kind of woman who would reorganize your entire bedroom if she thought it didn't look cohesive enough for guests, and who treated my academic and personal milestones like trophies she had won rather than things I had actually achieved. She was a stage mom without the stage, always pushing me toward paths she thought would make her look like the perfect parent, regardless of whether those paths made me happy. When I was 19, I wanted to take a gap year to travel and work on a farm in Europe, but she called it a waste of potential and forced me into a business degree I hated, telling me that if I didn't follow her plan, she would stop supporting me financially. I complied, mostly because I was terrified of failing in her eyes, and I spent 4 years miserable, graduating with honors that meant nothing to me but everything to her. The breaking point didn't come all at once, though. It was a slow, agonizing erosion of my identity. I started working at a corporate firm in the city, and every single weekend was a battle to see her. She demanded I come home for family dinners, which were really just interrogations about my boss, my savings account, and why I hadn't found a suitable partner yet. I felt like I was living a double life. In my own apartment, I was a messy, creative person who loved painting and indie music, but the moment I stepped into her house, I became the polished, obedient daughter she invented. Then came the opportunity of a lifetime. A prestigious fellowship opened up in Florence, Italy for an art restoration program, something I had dreamed of since I was a child, something that had absolutely nothing to do with business or prestige. I applied in secret, got accepted, and for the first time in my life I felt like I was breathing real oxygen. When I told my mother, the reaction wasn't just disappointment. It was a volcanic eruption of toxic rage. She told me I was selfish, that I was leaving her alone when she needed me most, and that I was throwing away a promising future for a pipe dream. She even threatened to call my employer and tell them I was having a mental breakdown just to stop me from leaving. But I had already signed the lease in Florence. I had already booked the flight. I was done being the side character in my mother's drama. The week leading up to my flight was a nightmare of psychological warfare. She would call me at 3 in the morning, weeping about how she had chest pains, or she would show up at my apartment unannounced and start packing my bags, telling me she was saving me from myself. She tried to guilt-trip me about my father, who had passed away years ago, saying that he would be ashamed of me, which was the lowest blow imaginable. I held my ground though because I realized that the guilt was just a leash, and if I didn't snap it now, I would be tied to that chair until the day she died. I had my bags packed, my passport in my hand, and a sense of resolve that was vibrating through my bones. On the morning of the flight, she texted me 20 times before I even reached the security checkpoint. She said she had fallen and hurt her ankle, that she was at the emergency room, and that I was the only one who could take her home. I knew based on the past that this was likely a lie, but the fear still gnawed at me. I checked my bank account, saw that she had been trying to access my secondary account, and realized she had probably staged this entire thing to force me to cancel. I walked through the terminal, my heart pounding against my ribs, feeling like a criminal despite knowing I was doing nothing wrong. As I sat at the gate, the messages kept flooding in, growing more erratic, more desperate, and more abusive. She called me names I won't even repeat, accused me of being a monster, and told me that if I boarded that plane I was no longer her daughter. That was the moment I realized the bridge wasn't just burning. It had been made of paper the whole time. You see, the hardest part about growing up with a parent like mine is the constant gaslighting. She had this incredible talent for making me feel like I was the one who was crazy, that I was the one who was being unreasonable, when in reality she was the one orchestrating every single conflict. There were times in my mid-20s when I genuinely questioned my own sanity. I would sit in my office staring at a spreadsheet, wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I was just a flighty, ungrateful child who couldn't appreciate the sacrifices she made. But those sacrifices were always weaponized. She would bring up my tuition, my childhood piano lessons, or the time she helped me move into my first apartment as if they were debts I could never pay off. Every birthday, every holiday, was a transaction where I had to pay her back with my autonomy. I remember one specific Thanksgiving where I wanted to spend it with my partner at the time, and she went on a 2-hour tirade about how I was dismantling the family unit. She didn't care about the family unit. She cared about having an audience for her misery. I spent so many years trying to appease her, trying to find that one golden ticket, that one achievement or that one specific way of being, that would finally make her say, "I'm proud of you and I trust your judgment." But that day never came. It never came because her approval wasn't something to be earned. It was a moving target that she intentionally kept just out of reach to keep me running. When I got the acceptance letter for the fellowship in Florence, I kept it hidden in the bottom of a dresser drawer for 3 weeks. I didn't even celebrate at first because I was too busy calculating the cost of her reaction. I knew that leaving would mean the end of my relationship with her as it existed, and honestly, a small part of me was grieving that possibility. It is a strange, hollow feeling to realize that your parent is the person you have to protect yourself from most. I had to become an expert in concealment. I opened a separate bank account, I started moving my important documents out of her reach, and I began the slow process of untangling my life from her control. It was like performing surgery on my own life, cauterizing every connection that she used to pull on my strings. And that week before the flight? It was pure, unadulterated chaos. She showed up at my work twice, once claiming she had an emergency that required me to leave early, which of course was just her wanting me to accompany her to a gala where she wanted to show me off as her successful corporate daughter. When I refused to leave, she created a scene in the lobby, weeping loudly about how modern children have no respect for their elders. My coworkers were looking on, and I felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but this time the embarrassment was eclipsed by an absolute, ironclad resolve. I knew this was the final act of her manipulation. She knew I was planning to leave, and she was doing everything in her power to break my spirit before I could get to the airport. I remember staring into the bathroom mirror that night, my face pale, my eyes tired, and telling myself, "You are doing this for you. Not for her, not for the past, but for the life you deserve." I started packing my bags in the middle of the night, layering my clothes with trembling hands, feeling like I was preparing to escape a burning building. And that morning when I sat at the gate, hearing the pinging of the notifications one after another, it was like the final countdown. Each vibration of my phone was a reminder of the prison I was leaving behind. She sent pictures of herself in there, but I looked closely at the background of the photos and noticed a calendar on the wall that showed a date from 3 years ago. She wasn't even good at the lies anymore because she didn't think I would have the audacity to look. She thought I was still that terrified 19-year-old who would jump at her command. So that's the situation I was in, sitting there with my life packed into 2 suitcases, watching my phone screen light up with abuse from the woman who gave me life, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you exactly how I handled that final moment of confrontation and the aftermath of leaving, I want you to pause this video, go down to the comments section, and tell me what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have turned the phone off and walked away? Or would you have fallen for the guilt trip one last time? The flight attendant walked past and gave me a sympathetic smile, sensing the tension, and for a second I almost broke. I almost stood up and headed for the exit. But then I looked at a photo of myself as a young girl. Someone who was vibrant and happy before the weight of expectations crushed her. And I knew I couldn't go back. I took a deep breath, scrolled through the 34 messages one last time to ensure I wasn't missing a genuine emergency, and then I blocked her number. I didn't just mute her, I blocked her. I also blocked her social media accounts and sent an email to our extended family telling them that I was taking a sabbatical, and would not be reachable for the foreseeable future. Boarding the plane felt like walking into a new world. The air smelled different. I sat down in 14A, watched the ground fall away, and for the first time in years, the silence in my head was beautiful. I landed in Italy 12 hours later, and I didn't check my phone until I was at my new apartment in the heart of Florence. When I finally turned it on, there were dozens of missed calls from my aunt, my cousins, and even some of my mother's friends. They were all echoing her narrative. I was the cruel, heartless daughter who had abandoned her mother during a medical crisis. But I had already checked with my mother's neighbor, who I had messaged earlier that morning, and they confirmed that my mother was perfectly fine, sitting on her porch drinking tea, and had never been to the hospital. The realization that she had manufactured a full-scale medical emergency, just to manipulate me into staying, confirmed everything I had feared. The aftermath wasn't easy. I dealt with a lot of pressure from the extended family, but I stood my ground. I told them the truth about what had happened, and slowly the noise started to die down. My mother eventually stopped trying to reach me, though I hear through the grapevine that she still tells everyone she meets about her terrible daughter who left her behind. But honestly, I don't care anymore. My life in Florence is everything I dreamed of. I am working on restoring frescoes from the Renaissance. I am meeting people who value me for who I am rather than what I can do for them, and for the first time I am actually happy. I realize that setting boundaries, even if they feel like you're setting yourself on fire, is the only way to save your soul. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is leave, even when everyone tells you that you are wrong. I learned that you cannot fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed, and you definitely cannot pour from a cup that is constantly being emptied by someone else's demands. I have found my own voice, and I have found the peace I was denied for so long. The process of rebuilding has been just as transformative as the act of leaving. In the beginning, I had nightmares where I would wake up in a cold sweat, thinking she was standing at the foot of my bed, demanding that I apologize for existing. I had to learn how to exist without her critique, which sounds simple, but it was incredibly difficult. Every time I finished a project or painted something new, my first instinct was to wonder what she would say about it. It's too dark, or you could have done better, or why are you wasting your time on this? Those imaginary voices were loud for months, but I kept painting, I kept working, I kept living, and eventually those voices began to fade. I started to fill my life with people who supported my growth rather than people who required my stagnation. I made friends in Italy who saw my worth, and they helped me heal from the years of emotional starvation. I realized that for years I had been surviving rather than living, and now I was finally doing both. There were moments when I felt the urge to reach out, to show her what I had achieved, to prove her wrong, but then I remembered that she would never be wrong in her own mind. Giving her my success would only be giving her more fuel. So I stayed silent. The silence became my greatest weapon and my greatest sanctuary. It allowed me to cultivate a version of myself that she would have never allowed to exist. I became stronger, not just for myself, but for the future I am building. I am not the daughter she wanted, and I am certainly not the puppet she expected. I am a person with agency, with desires, and with a life that belongs entirely to me. If you take anything away from my story, let it be this. Your life is your own, and you are not obligated to sacrifice your happiness just to satisfy the expectations of others, even if those others happen to be your own parents. You have to be the pilot of your own plane, and sometimes that means leaving the ground behind. If you were on my side in this whole mess, please like this video, as it really helps me know that I wasn't alone in this. Make sure to subscribe for more stories like this one, as I have plenty more to share from my journey to becoming myself. And finally, I want to hear your take on this. Was I too harsh? Or did I do exactly what was necessary? Share your final thoughts on this whole situation in the comments section below. And I will see you all in the next story.